Why Gen Z isn't available after work hours is one of the most complained about topics in every corporate HR meeting, every manager's group chat, and every LinkedIn post written by someone over 40 who can't figure out what went wrong with the new hires. And the answer isn't complicated. It's just uncomfortable for the people asking the question. Gen Z isn't available after work hours because after work hours aren't work hours. That's it. That's the whole answer. The time after 5 p.m. belongs to them, not to the job, not to the manager, not to the company that pays them for 40 hours a week and somehow expects access to 60. Why that position is completely irrational, where it came from, and why the people who have a problem with it are the ones who got played, not the generation refusing to play along. Before anything else, let's be specific about what we're actually talking about, because available after work hours gets framed as a minor ask. A quick email here, a fast response there, just being reachable in case something comes up. That framing is dishonest. Here's what being available after work hours actually means in practice. It means your phone is never fully off. It means even when you're eating dinner, watching something, trying to sleep, part of your brain is monitoring for a notification. It means you can never fully decompress, because fully decompressing requires knowing that nobody's gonna need something from you in the next hour. It means your personal time is permanently on call, even when nothing is actually happening. A McKinsey study found that employees who feel expected to respond to work communications after hours report significantly higher levels of stress and burnout than those who don't. Not because the emails themselves take that long, because the anticipation of them never allows the nervous system to actually rest. That constant low-level activation, the background hum of being reachable, costs something, and it costs it every single day. And for the previous generation, that cost was just accepted as part of having a job. Gen Z looked at that cost and said, no, the job pays for 40 hours. The 40 hours are yours. The rest belongs to us. The expectation of after-hours availability didn't always exist. It was created by technology and then normalized so gradually that people stopped questioning whether it was reasonable. Before email, before smartphones, before Slack, the workday ended when you left the building. Not because people were lazy, because there was no mechanism to reach them. The separation between work and life was structural, built into the technology of the time. And then the technology changed. Email meant the office could follow you home. Smartphones meant the office could follow you everywhere. Slack meant the office could follow you into your bathroom at 11 p.m. on a Sunday. And instead of treating this as a problem to be managed, companies treated it as a feature to be exploited. The implicit deal shifted. You used to be paid for your time in the building. Now you were expected to be reachable always, everywhere, as a baseline condition of employment. And the extra hours of availability, the emails answered at 9 p.m., the messages checked on weekends, the brain that never fully switched off. All of that was given for free because it was expected, because everyone did it, because not doing it made you look like you weren't committed. Gen Z is the first generation to look at that shift and call it what it is, an extraction. Time and mental energy taken without compensation or consent, dressed up as professionalism and dedication. Here's something that gets completely ignored in every conversation about Gen Z's work habits. They didn't arrive at this position randomly. They were taught it by observation. They watched parents who were always available, who answered emails at dinner, who took calls on weekends, who said things like, I just need to send one quick reply, and then spend 45 minutes on the laptop while the family waits, who were technically present but mentally at the office constantly, and they watched what that produced. Not success necessarily, not happiness, not a life that looked worth having. They watched it produce burnout, health problems, missed moments, an identity so wrapped up in work that when the job disappeared or changed, the person didn't know who they were anymore. The American Psychological Association found that chronic overwork is linked to a 33% increased risk of stroke and significantly higher rates of anxiety and depression. These aren't abstract statistics. They're outcomes Gen Z watched happen to specific people in their lives. So when they enter the workforce, and a manager implies that real commitment means being available at all hours, they're not hearing a reasonable professional expectation. They're hearing the same thing that burned out everyone who came before them, and they're saying no. Not because they don't care about their work, because they care about what happens to them if they let work consume everything. Here's the argument that gets made constantly against Gen Z's position on this. If you're not available after hours, you're not as committed as the people who are. You'll fall behind. You won't advance. The people who put in more will get more. That argument has a problem. The data doesn't support it. Microsoft's research on productivity found that working beyond standard hours does not produce proportionally more output after a certain point, and that point is lower than most people assume. Additional hours produce diminishing returns on actual work quality. The extra emails sent at 10 p.m. are not better emails. The extra thinking done while trying to fall asleep is not better thinking. It's just more time spent in a work-adjacent state without producing work-quality results. Stanford research showed that productivity per hour drops sharply after 50 hours a week. After 55 hours, output drops so much that working 70 hours produces the same result as working 55. The extra 15 hours are essentially wasted. You're just there, or reachable, or monitoring, without actually producing anything proportional to the time cost. Gen Z understands this intuitively, even if they haven't read the research. They know that being available doesn't mean being productive. They know that answering a Slack message at 9 p.m. doesn't make them better at their job. It just makes them more accessible. And accessibility is not a job skill, it's boundary erosion. Here's what people who complain about Gen Z's unavailability after hours never ask. What are they doing with that time? Because the assumption behind the complaint is that they're doing nothing, that they're wasting the hours on screens and entertainment, and that giving some of that time to the job would cost them nothing meaningful. That assumption is wrong. The same generation that refuses to answer emails at 9 p.m. is the most entrepreneurial generation in modern history. 62% of Gen Z say they want to start their own business, according to a Dell Technology survey. A significant portion of them are already building income outside their jobs, side businesses, content creation, freelance work, investing, skill development that makes them more valuable in every role they'll ever have. The time after work hours isn't empty time. It's the time Gen Z is using to build the things that will eventually make them independent of the employer who wants them reachable around the clock. And the irony is that the managers frustrated by their unavailability are the ones who made it necessary by demonstrating that employment isn't loyal, that companies cut without ceremony, and that the only real security is what you build for yourself. They created the exact generation of workers who treat the job as one income stream rather than an identity to be protected at all costs. Gen Z is unavailable after work hours because they're busy building something the job can't take away. Here's something worth saying directly. The expectation of after-hours availability flows almost entirely in one direction. Employees are expected to be reachable after hours. Companies are not expected to be responsive to employees after hours. You can be emailed at 9 p.m., but HR won't answer a benefits question at 9 p.m. You can be contacted on a Saturday, but the payroll department won't fix an error on a Saturday. You are expected to absorb the company's needs outside of business hours, while the company's obligations to you remain strictly within them. That double standard is so normalized that most people never notice it. Gen Z notice it immediately, and they responded the only way that makes logical sense when a deal is one-sided. They stopped honoring the side of the deal that was only ever expected of them. This isn't disrespect. It isn't laziness. It's a straightforward refusal to accept terms that were never agreed to and never compensated. If after-hours availability is genuinely valuable to the company, it should be compensated. If it's not being compensated, it's not a reasonable expectation. It's just an ask that benefits one party at the expense of the other. Here's the part that often gets left out of this conversation. The managers and companies that have stopped expecting after-hours availability are not suffering for it. They're winning. Companies that implemented clear boundaries around after-hours communication, no work emails after 6 p.m., no weekend Slack, explicit right to disconnect policies, saw employee satisfaction increase, turnover decrease, and in multiple cases productivity go up. Not because people were working more, because people were resting properly and bringing better work to the hours they were actually paid for. France passed a law in 2017 giving employees the legal right to disconnect from work communications outside of working hours. Portugal followed. Several other European countries have implemented similar protections. These aren't fringe policies from countries that don't take work seriously. They're evidence-based responses to data, showing that always-on culture produces worse outcomes for everyone. The managers who understand this aren't complaining about Gen Z's unavailability. They're building cultures where unavailability after hours is the expectation for everyone. Because they know that a rested, boundaried employee is a better employee than a reachable but burnt out one. The ones still complaining are the ones who benefited from the old system, who gave their own after-hours time and wanted validation that the sacrifice was worth it. It wasn't. And Gen Z refusing to make the same sacrifice isn't disrespect. It's the correction that should have happened a long time ago. When Gen Z isn't available after work hours comes down to one simple thing. They decided their time is theirs, not the company's, not the managers, not the culture's, theirs. And that decision, which sounds obvious when you say it out loud, is apparently radical enough to generate think pieces and LinkedIn posts and HR training sessions about how to manage the difficult new generation. The difficulty isn't the generation, it's the expectation. The expectation that employees should be perpetually accessible was never reasonable. It was just accepted for long enough that it started to feel normal. Gen Z didn't accept it, and the discomfort that is created is the discomfort of a reasonable boundary meeting an unreasonable expectation. After 5 p.m., they're gone, and they should be. And eventually the workplaces that figure that out will have the best people, because the best people know what they're worth, and what they're worth doesn't include their evenings.